Did you hear that sound? That was the sound of somebody just massively moving the goalposts around podcast measurement. And the funny thing is, when it happened, most podcasters didn't even look up from their hosting dashboard. Or they were too busy being distracted over debates around the efficacy of short-form clips for growing a podcast, or whether a podcast is even a podcast if it doesn't have an RSS feed. But back to the main point. There's this group called the Alliance for Measurement in Podcasting, AMP, and they've been working on a cross-platform standard for how plays get counted. You know, so that when Spotify says you had 20,000 plays, and Apple Podcasts says something very different, and YouTube says something else entirely, there might actually be one shared definition underneath all of it. That sounds reasonable. I mean, that sounds like the kind of boring but necessary work the industry actually needs. And then you look at what they actually defined a play as. 30 seconds of continuous streaming. Not 60, 30. Spotify's already adopted it. They've updated their creator dashboard and everything. So as of right now, if someone opens your episode on Spotify and listens for 31 seconds before going back to whatever they were doing before, well, that counts. That's a play. The creator gets the dopamine. But we need to talk about what this actually means for you and your podcast.
Podcasting Insights.
Hello, this is Podmastery, Podcasting Insights for Indie Creators. I'm Neal, the Podmaster, and each episode I'm doing all I can to help you achieve Podmastery and get better results from your podcast. Let's be fair for a second before I get into why this AMP measurement story deserves way more skepticism than it's currently getting, particularly from so-called podcasting experts on LinkedIn who seemingly haven't dug deeper than the headlines on this particular one. The reason AMP exists is a genuine problem. Right now, a download means something very different depending on which hosting platform you're on. A play means something different depending on which app your listener uses. And for years, the IAB standard defined a play as 60 seconds. Apple Podcasts, and this is extraordinary by the way, defines a play as any listening that lasts more than 0 seconds. 0. i.e., you open the file from the RSS feed through their app and then close it again immediately, and Apple counts that. Someone pressed play by accident while their phone was in their pocket. So yes, a standard is better than no standard. I'm going to grant that one without argument. But here's what I want you to notice about this 30 seconds thing specifically. Spotify's justification for it was that 30 seconds is, and I'm quoting here, a reliable indicator of intentional consumption. Their phrase, their thinking, intentional consumption. So what they've essentially said is, if you listen for half a minute, you chose to be there. And I can see the logic of that. Someone who hits play and then immediately closes it, well, that's noise. But someone who's still there at 30 seconds made a deliberate choice. But here's what 30 seconds of continual playing is not. It's not someone who heard your hook. It's not someone who stuck around for your argument. It's not someone who got any value from your episode at all. In fact, it's probably not even somebody that's gone beyond the pre-roll ad if you're hosted by Acast or any other similar platform that plays their ads at the beginning of your content. It is, at its most generous, someone who decided they hadn't yet heard enough to make them want to leave. And that gets counted exactly the same as someone who listened to 45 minutes. Now, why does this matter for you as a podcaster who isn't hosting through Acast, probably isn't running pre-roll ads, and doesn't have a brand team obsessing over impression metrics? Well, it matters for two reasons. First of all, your numbers are about to look different. If you've been comparing your performance against previous episodes or against industry benchmarks, or even against what your hosting platform has been telling you, well, you may see a big difference in your stats. Not because your show's changed in any way, because what they're counting has changed. Secondly, and this is the one that I care way more about, if you start optimizing for this metric, you are going to be optimizing for the wrong thing. 30-second plays are a vanity metric, pure and simple. The number that actually tells you whether your show is working is retention. How far through your episodes people are actually listening. And Apple Podcasts and Spotify will give you that data, at least in aggregate form. And that's the number to care about. You just got to dig a bit deeper to find it. So I'll say this plainly. If someone consistently listens to 70 or 80% of your episodes, that is worth more than any amount of play counts of any description. That means that person's engaged. That person might be the kind of person that would take action on something you suggest or recommend. You know, like clicking an affiliate link or buying something that you've been paid to promote. More importantly, that person might also tell someone else about your show. But someone who hit play and was still there at 31 seconds because they were looking for the skip button and couldn't get to it 2 seconds sooner, well, that person is not your audience. There's still the question of Apple Podcasts. And James Cridland pointed it out on the most recent episode of Pod News Weekly Review at the time of recording this. He said, Apple Podcasts is now the third most popular podcast app. Third, no longer first or even second. And they're the outlier on all this. Apple still counts a play as any duration greater than 0 seconds, which means every accidental tap, every pocket play, every person who opened your show and immediately went, nah, this isn't for me. Well, Apple counts those. The industry apparently needs Apple to come on board for this standard to mean anything at a cross-platform level. And Apple hasn't indicated any intention to do so yet. Which means, right now, the same show might have one set of numbers in Spotify's dashboard and a completely different set in Apple Podcasts Connect. And neither of them is telling you what you probably think they're telling you. This has always been true, by the way. The idea that podcast metrics are reliable, comparable, or particularly meaningful has always been a sort of fan fiction that the industry maintains to keep advertisers comfortable. What's changed is that at least part of the industry is now trying to make it less fictional. So that's not nothing. But don't mistake progress on the metric for the metric suddenly becoming good. They are not the same thing. If this has got you thinking about whether your own podcast success is being measured correctly or whether you've been staring at the wrong numbers entirely, there are a few ways to dig deeper with me. And one of those is to head to podmastery.co and click Need Help. And then we can figure out what's actually going on with your show and tailor the advice for your specific show. I'm Neal Velio, thanks for listening, and until the next episode, good luck with your continuing efforts to attain pod mastery.
Podcasting.